The opening ceremony of the Faith in Finance conference held in Zug, Switzerland, told you a great deal about what was to come. Representatives from 8 world faiths were there. Each faith group had one person come forwards, share a blessing, and then leave an object which represented their faith in the monastery chapel where it took place. The Sikh representative left a sacred cloth. The Shinto representative left a sprig from a Japanese tree. The Christian representative a marquetry wooden cross, and so on for the Buddhist, the Muslim, the Taoist from China and the Hindu. I was privileged to be the Jewish representative, and so along with the blessing I blew a shofar, the Jewish symbol of a time of change and transformation, and then I left it there. The room and the conference which followed it represented faiths which span humanity and span the globe, that we all, like it or not, share. Those who are there do like it, that we share the world. We know that what we do in China will affect the rest of the planet. When China moves away from burning coal, it will improve our environment here in Britain. The decisions that America makes will cause climate change in Bangladesh. Employment decisions from companies based in London will improve workers' conditions in Nigeria. The point of the Zug conference was to bring faith leaders from the various denominations of these world faiths together with bankers and investment houses from the world's capital markets, with leaders of the United Nations Development Programme, to see if we can together help to inspire millions of small changes that will take the world on a path towards sustainable development. We define sustainable development as that which is specified in the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. They're noble and they're necessary. Goals for the reduction of poverty, for equality of access to education, for making clean water and sanitation available to all, for halting man-made climate change, for greening and cleaning energy, and more. Why faiths? Why finance? Faiths because, in the words of Martin Palmer of the Alliance of Religions and Conservation, faiths are ways to communicate and affect centuries of experience in working with peculiarities of human behaviour within the context of a greater vision of the meaning and significance of life. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Shinto, Taoism and Sikhism are all investors in eternity. We do not sacrifice the dream of long-term human happiness on the altar of short-term and temporary gain, and we aim to do so as larger parts of the whole of humanity. And finance? Because between all the world's faiths, their institutional might owns about 8% of the world's habitable land. From the Church of England's over 100,000 acres of Britain, including shopping centres, industrial estates and school premises, to the 5% of all commercial forests worldwide owned by faith groups. Critically, faith groups own an estimated 10% of the world's total financial investment through their endowments, their pension funds, their development funds, their charitable funds, even burial funds like the £14 million managed by the UK Jewish Joint Burial Society to ensure we can all have a decent funeral when the time comes. But well beyond this, finance, because faiths can, when effective, help their adherents make long-term and future-focused decisions on what they do with their own investments for the good of their grandchildren, great-grandchildren and onwards, and for the good of the whole of humanity and the planet for which we care. And this can have a huge impact. And one more question. In this conference and in these issues is why bother with Jews? As I said in the paper I gave at the conference, Jews are a small people. There are only 14 million of us in the entire world. We're therefore well aware that any Jewish contribution to sustainable development has to be done together with other peoples and other faiths. Just under half of the world's Jewish population lives in the state of Israel, which is a highly developed Western-style economy with low unemployment, decent education standards and high consumption patterns. is not always the best example of Jewish values put into action, but there are some very strong examples of sustainable development there, such as the use of solar energy generation, both in Israel and by Israeli companies around the world, conservation of water resources, and pioneering ways to enable fresh water to be as sparingly used as possible. Encouraging Israel to be an example of sustainable development through investments in the country in businesses and social enterprise which encourage the well-being of all is open to Jews and others throughout the world. Outside of Israel, Jews are strongly represented in the economies of the Jewish diaspora. They're investors, users of resources, professionals, members of governments, they're business people. Why Jews? There's another reason why we cannot get ourselves away from the sustainable development of the world and the changes we're going to have to make if we're able to hand a good world over to our children and grandchildren. It's because of our teachings. We are a religion that values small changes just as much as the huge earth-shattering transformations. Our Torah tells it both ways. Yes, sometimes we need the Red Sea to part to make progress. Sometimes we need the presence of God to inhabit our sanctuary in a pillar of cloud or a pillar of fire. Sometimes we need Mount Sinai to erupt so that we hear the Ten Commandments. But more often, our religion teaches, it's small changes and individual decisions that change the world. Moses, for example, decides to intervene when he sees a single Israelite slave being beaten by a single taskmaster. Judah decides to save his brother Joseph from death in the desert. And in our Torah portion Toldot, Rebekah decides to substitute Jacob for Esau at a critical moment in Isaac's life. Because of these small decisions, Moses becomes the first rabbi of the Jewish people and our teacher for all time. Joseph finds himself in Egypt, ready to make us into a people who know the heart of the stranger. And Jacob becomes Israel and makes us who we are, the people who struggle with God and work in partnership to repair the world. I believe strongly in the power of small changes, small steps that we can make towards a future worth living. I also believe strongly in constructive, learning relationships between people of many faiths to magnify these steps. I believe in partnership between religions and business and good causes to bring the steps onto a global level. Saying, what does it matter what my car's emissions are if China is building coal-fired power stations, condemns us all to a downward spiral towards destruction. The people of Kiribati, a tiny island in the Pacific with a population of 103,000, just 3 meters above sea level, remind us of the cost of no change. They bought from the Church of England 20 square kilometres on Fiji, 1,500 miles away, so that when their island is sunk by rising sea levels, they can't be sure it'll happen, but it might, they can all be evacuated there. They hope never to use it for this purpose. Their future and that of what might become 700 million climate change refugees worldwide by 2050, in the most doom-laden predictions, depends on millions of small changes made by the majority of the world's individual people. Our portion today is a story, Toldot, a story of the beginning of the people Israel, ourselves. And the story should be one of bringing good to the world, and in a globalized world, working with others who are not Israel to make the world livable, sustaining and nurturing for all. It's a story where the selfish one, Isaac, and his selfish son Esau gets his meat stew today, but he loses his future. The ones who love because love is the real meaning of life, Rebekah and Jacob, they hold the keys to the future. May we ever be lovers of our planet and of humanity, making the small changes that we need day by day.